Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to have a new video for you. I know it's been a little while since I've recorded anything. I took a bit of a break after wedding season and just gave myself some time to refresh before really working on anything. Today's video is going to be about the GFX 50S2. Just a disclaimer, I'm not going to go into the specs about the camera. This isn't a detailed review. I'm no expert. This is mostly based off my opinion, my experience with the camera as a fine art wedding photographer, and also where I'm at in my own business. So this won't apply to a lot of people. I know tons of photographers who love the GFX. So this is just my personal opinion, what I think for my business. And if you're in the same place or you have a similar style, hopefully this video will be helpful for you as well. So first, I just want to talk about the pros of the GFX. Number one, the colors. I know most of you know this, but Fuji cameras have beautiful colors. Whenever I shoot with their cameras, the skin tones look perfect. There isn't much adjusting that you need to do in post. I noticed with my Canon R6, which is the mirrorless camera that I'm shooting with right now, there is quite a bit of adjusting that I need to do to the oranges and the yellows, which I'll do in the HSL color sliders. But with the GFX and most Fuji cameras, you'll notice that there isn't much adjusting you need to do. As soon as you shoot it, the raw file looks pretty great, and the skin tones are already that perfect, peachy, true-to-life skin color. This is one of the big reasons why I was excited about trying the GFX, is for those beautiful colors, and it did not disappoint in that area. Number two, it's a medium format digital camera. So this is pretty amazing because the sensor size is quite a bit bigger than a regular DSLR. So you get tons of depth of field, you get that beautiful bokeh and depth of field that you get with a Contax or a medium format film camera. And then you also get a ton of detail, and the dynamic range is pretty crazy. Number three, it feels like shooting film. So when I had the camera in my hands, it really felt like I was shooting film. Depending on if you're using the 50S or the 50S version 2, the 50S, the original version, even has the shutter dials at the top, which is what you would do with the film camera. The 50S2 is a bit more modern. Everything is on the screen now, which personally is a bit easier if you're working with a digital camera. It's kind of nice to just have the settings at the top in the digital panel. The shutter sound was really beautiful, and it was just overall nice to walk around with. Pretty heavy duty camera, but it made you feel like a true photographer. And it does remind you also of a film camera because it is quite a bit slower than most digital cameras. I found myself only taking a few images at a time, whereas if I'm using my Canon R6 or any faster camera, usually I just fire off a bunch. So it really did slow me down, make me think a lot more, which again could be a pro or con depending on if you're shooting film next to this camera or if you're not going to shoot film and you're only going to shoot with this camera. Number four was that I could use my 80mm Zeiss lens on the camera. And so how I did this was I used a Fringer adapter, which is about $1,000 Canadian, and I could actually put that on the camera and then adapt my 80mm Zeiss, and it gave it autofocus, which was really nice because there's other adapters you can use, but you'll only be able to use manual focus. So with this Fringer adapter, it gave me the autofocus capabilities, and it was actually pretty quick. So I didn't mind it. It was fairly fast at capturing the subject. Obviously, if you were gonna do walking shots or kids moving around, I don't think it's fast enough for that, but it was pretty good since it's an adapted lens. Then you get that beautiful bokeh and that dreamy look, which is what Contax lovers want. So those were my pros. I'm sure that there's 1,000 more other things you could look at and that are really good about the GFX, but it's been a little while since I've held it in my hand, so those were just the initial thoughts when it came to the good qualities about it. And now I'm gonna jump into the cons, or just things that personally I didn't love about the camera. So number one is the huge files. My computer is already slow enough. I don't have an updated iMac. I'm waiting for the newest one to come out. And so when I was trying to upload the files, I just felt like my computer was crashing. It just took so long. Again, it's like a 50 megapixel or 100 megapixel sensor. So you'll need a lot more memory cards and a lot more storage and hard drives for your computer. Number 2 is that it's just really slow. So as a digital shooter and a film shooter, it was almost in between. I actually find that I shoot with my film camera quite a bit faster than I was shooting with the GFX. Maybe it's because I didn't fully get used to it, and so that's why. But I did feel like it really slowed me down. And again, the autofocus was quite slow and the camera overall is pretty clunky. But when I'm looking for a digital camera, I do look for a bit of that speed, and so the GFX didn't really have that for me. I know that if you get the GFX 100S that you will get a bit faster autofocus, but I have heard with the 100S that the colors aren't as good because they have a different sensor or something. So the 50S is nicer because you are getting those beautiful Fuji colors. I don't know much about the 100S, but I just remember a lot of photographers saying that the colors looked a lot different. The raw files were harder to edit, a little more lifeless. So that's something to consider as well. Number 3 is that the 80mm Zeiss was too long on the GFX when it was adapted. So you don't get that same focal length that you do on the Contax, where it's more of a 50mm equivalent. On the GFX, it's a lot longer, and so I just find that I'm having to stand a lot farther back from my subjects. It's not easy if you're trying to shoot kids and they're running around, or even just walking shots. I felt like I had to be too far away, and personally, I really like the look of a 50mm equivalent, and maybe that's just my style changing a bit too. I'm almost liking the kind of wider images where more is in focus. I just felt there was a little bit too much focal length and I had to stand too far back, and almost there was too much separation from the subjects to the background. So it had that really strong depth of field like you would get with an 85mm lens on a digital camera. It's very similar where they really popped from the background, but I personally don't always love the way that looks for portraits and for family shots. And number 4 is that the lenses are too limited. So I just found that they didn't really have too many selections, and all the lenses were very expensive. So I didn't really like that you had to pay $2,000-3,000 just to like start building your collection. It's a bit too pricey, whereas other camera brands like Canon and Sony, you can get cheaper lenses in the $100 ranges. So I didn't really like that Fuji only has expensive lenses. Maybe they've come out with something since, I haven't looked into it, but just from my experience when I was looking into it, everything seemed really expensive to start building your kit. Okay, so here are my thoughts after going over the pros and the cons. This is just personal preference on what makes the most sense for my business and my style of shooting. So take this with a grain of salt, but a lot of you have been asking me for my thoughts. So here we go. It didn't make sense to buy the GFX for my personal shooting style because I find that I actually am a pretty quick shooter. And to be honest, even with my Contax 645, I feel like I can shoot faster on that than I could with the GFX 50S. So I didn't like that I was so restricted with the speed when I was shooting with the GFX, and that I could actually just shoot film and shoot quite a bit faster on the Contax instead. I also wasn't ready to give up film, and so for me the GFX is more so for people that are looking to transition out of film, or maybe you're shooting luxury high-end weddings where you really need something similar to film in that high quality look, and you can't risk missing the shot because you're shooting film. So I understand that there's definitely reasons why people move towards the GFX. I know Ryan Ray and Will Reed, they are some really popular photographers in the US and in Canada, and they make the GFX look amazing. So I think it's just really personal preference. I still love shooting film. I don't plan on giving up film. And I actually am moving towards shooting smaller weddings and focusing more on lifestyle, maternity, newborn. And that's just where I'm at in my life and in my business. So for me, if I was to get the GFX, it wouldn't really make sense because I'm not going to be shooting a ton more weddings. I also really enjoy having my digital camera to be really fast, and that way I can shoot my film on the side and kind of back up with my digital, so that way I'm making sure that I get the shot and that it's in focus, and then I'm shooting film next to it. So again, GFX didn't make sense because the focal length was too long, so when I was shooting GFX with the 80 Zeiss next to my Contax with the 80 Zeiss, they weren't equivalent, so I'd always have to back up when I went to shoot the GFX, and then I'd have to move in when I went to shoot with the Contax. So instead, now I can shoot with my Canon R6 mirrorless, or I love my 5D Mark III, and I can have my 50mm lens on there, and I can have my contacts and my 80 Zeiss, and they're basically the same equivalent, so I'm not having to move when I'm trying to back up the shot or shoot between the two cameras. Another thing that I realized was, even though Fuji's colors are amazing, you're still having to take those images, pull them into Lightroom, and edit them. And for me, the beautiful thing about shooting film is that I'm getting images back from my lab, Photovision, that are basically already edited and ready to go. So that is the beauty of film, is that everything is done in the camera, and then you can have the lab take care of the scanning for you. And so you're not having to mess around with the colors or getting it to look like film. It already looks like film, obviously. But if you're shooting with the GFX, even though you have the beautiful colors, you're gonna have to try to figure out how to make them look more like film. I just found for myself, no matter how hard I tried, it still had that digital look to them, which isn't a bad thing and a lot of people like, but for me there is that special quality to film that I really love and that I'm not ready to give up anytime soon. So Fuji Canada does offer a try before you buy, so I can link the website below. I think it's still going on, but if you enter your information, you can actually meet up with the Fuji rep and they will let you try out the GFX and a bunch of lenses so you can see if you like it for yourself. I'm really glad that I did that. Otherwise, I think I would have just purchased it and probably regretted it or returned it. So it was so nice getting to test it out and find out that it really wasn't for me and it didn't work with my workflow and my shooting style. And my current setup, for a lot of those who are asking, because I know I haven't made a recent video on this, I use the Canon 5D Mark III quite often, especially for lifestyle and family, that kind of stuff. For weddings, I use the Canon R6, which is a lot faster and more accurate, which is great for weddings. So that way I'm not missing any moments. The R6 is great for speed, accuracy, low light. I love when I'm shooting a reception and I can, you know, put up the ISO and there's not much grain even at 6000 ISO. So that is a huge benefit over my Mark III. But I still struggle with the editing of the colors for my R6. So that's why I prefer shooting with my Mark III for lifestyle and family, because I love the colors and the skin tones that come out of it. So I have my Canon 5D Mark III, which I shoot with a lot, with the Sigma 50mm 1.4. I love that combo. I find that it's pretty sharp even at 1.4. And then I have my Canon R6, and I have a bunch of EF lenses, 24, 35, 85mm. And I just wanted to show you guys some images from my Canon 5D Mark III that I shot recently at a studio, and I'll show those next to my film images so you can see how I can get them pretty close with my 5D Mark III and my contacts. And I shot Portra 400 for the film images. And here are some images I shot on my R6 from a wedding last year, and some film images from that wedding as well. So you can see that my style is changing, evolving. I'm not only trying to get that really shallow depth of field anymore and bright and airy. I really like capturing the emotion, getting the wide angles, really telling a story of the day. If you just shoot on a 50 the whole day, you're not gonna get those moments and those reactions. But if you put on a 24mm or a 35mm, you'll be able to get more people in the frame, tell a wider story of what's happening. It just adds a whole new level to your gallery. So that's it, guys. Those are my thoughts on the GFX. Hopefully I didn't offend too many people. It is a beautiful camera. I enjoyed shooting with it. It just doesn't make sense for where I'm at in my business, and I still love the results that I'm getting with my Canon cameras and my film cameras as well. Make sure to subscribe and like the video below. I'm gonna start putting more videos out again, so if you have any suggestions, ideas, make sure to write them in the comments below. Have a great rest of your day, guys, and remember that Jesus loves you.